Hey, this is NFL legend, two-time Super Bowl champion Gary Clark. You know what you got to tune into, right? You know what podcast is off the chain.
President Jason Wright, and you're listening to Burgundy Network Podcast.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Burgundy Network Podcast, part of the Believe Podcast Network. This episode is brought to you by BetOnline, which is the fastest and easiest way to place all of your sports bets. Regardless of which sport you like to bet on, BetOnline is the easiest way to place your bets. You can do live bets, future bets like Washington winning over 8.5 games, or even winning the NFC East if you're feeling really good after these roster moves, which is what we're going to be talking about on this episode. But BetOnline has the latest odds, news, and information, so you make all the best bets that you need to win some money. Because, Brian, who doesn't like winning money?
Let's go.
It doesn't feel good losing, but, guys, don't worry, because when you first sign up and make your first deposit, you get a 50% welcome bonus on that first deposit. So if you make some losses, it's okay. Just keep betting on Washington and Ron Rivera making moves that we had no idea were going to happen. And it's likely going to pay out because we as fans are just fans. We have no idea what's going on half the time. But, guys, I am your host, Josh Taylor. Joining me is Brian Murphy. What's going on, Brian? How you doing?
What's up, man? Yeah, it's itching closer. I mean, we're 11 days away. The 53-man roster is what it is right now, but it means that real football's happening. They're preparing for the Chargers. Exciting stuff. It's right around the corner.
Goal.
We're in September. It's football. You know, we can start to taste football. The fall's coming. I can't wait, man.
I know. Friday, I'm going to the UNC Tech game. It's supposed to be like
nice.
56 that night, 57. I said, Lord, I'm going to get me a hoodie. It's football season. It feels good. But, guys, with the season being so close, obviously we know there was a lot of roster moves made, a lot of guys cut, a lot of guys signed back on the team. So we'll talk about that. So real quick, for those who have been busy and not keeping up with everything like we have been, we have you covered for the 53 active roster due to change. It could change by the time you listen to this episode, to be honest with you.
Absolutely.
You could make three trades or some pickups by the time you get done listening to. But that's just the podcast game. But, guys, we are rolling with our three quarterbacks, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Taylor Heineke, and Kyle Allen. Then we have our three running backs, probably the fewest we've had in a while, now that I think about it. Three running backs, Antonio Gibson, J.D. McKissick, and Jarrett Patterson, the local boy, undrafted free agent. Love the story. Love everything that comes with it. Pulling for Jarrett to ball out this season. 7 wide receivers, which was one of the biggest questions we really had, was, are we going to go 6 or are we going to go 7? And once again, Ron proved a lot of us wrong going with 7. And the ones, and I will say, like we've been saying for a while, DeAndre Carter was likely to make the team, and I felt good with Dax Milne making the team. I thought only one of them would, and both did. Mm-hmm. So we got Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, Dami Brown, Adam Humphries, who was another lock that we mentioned a bunch. Cam Sims, DeAndre Carter, and Dax Milne, those last 6 and 7 wide receiver, more than likely some special teams guys too. And then tight ends, a lot of people were happy about this. 4, which is good. I like it. Logan Thomas, John Bates, who's still learning. I think he's going to turn out to be really good. Same as Reyes, another one of those guys that everyone been pulling for. Great story. Love to see it. He talked today. I don't know if you got to see it or not, like what he came from, like being like a DoorDash driver to just really going after and chasing his dreams. You love to see it. Like if you listen to him talk, you're so motivated afterwards. Like I love hearing that.
Amazing story for sure.
Absolutely. And then Ricky Seals-Jones, that vet as the 4th tight end. Love it too. I like having guys that have been around. Like I said, Samus Reyes can learn from him. Not only, Logan Thomas, and same with John Bates being a rookie. And then 9 offensive linemen, which is a lot. I know Ron said he wanted to keep 10. And we got a good bit on the practice squad too, which we'll talk about. But Charles Leno, Eric Flowers, Chase Rouillet, Brandon Sheriff, Sam Cosmi, Wes Schweitzer, Cornelius Lucas, Sadiq Charles, and Tyler Larson as that backup center. Brian, let everyone know what the number 1 defense in the league looks like.
That's right. So on the defensive line, they kept 9 guys. I would say the top 7 were all pretty much set in stone with Chase Young, Montez Sweat, Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, Matt Ioannidis, Tim Settle, and then James Smith-Williams kind of settled himself in there as, the next man up after Young and Sweat. Casey Toohill made the roster. Hadn't heard his name a whole lot this summer. I think he was dealing with an injury, so was a little bit of a question mark for me. Maybe I thought he might get cut for one of the younger guys, but he makes the roster, and so does Shaka Tony, one of their last rookie draft picks. So Tony makes the roster. William Bradley King gets put on the practice squad, so we'll see if we'll see him on the active roster at any point. But for now, those are your 9 on the defensive line. Linebackers, a little light there. Originally, it was 4 guys. Derek Forrest made the 53, then put on the IR, so they brought back David Mayo. Along with him are Jamin Davis, Cole Holcomb, John Bostic, and Khaleke Hudson. Little light there. Still think there could be a move there. I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit more.
Oh, yeah.
As David Mayo, like I said, rounds out the 5 linebackers. And then the cornerbacks, Kendall Fuller, William Jackson, Benjamin St. Juice, Torrey McTyer, and then Daryl Roberts makes the roster. Weren't sure about him, or at least
a big surprise to me.
Yeah, I didn't know if he did enough there. And then they have, Troy Apke listed as a corner. It seems like he's pretty much moved completely to a corner, which was kind of a surprise there. I think they really value him on special teams and his flexibility, his position flexibility. Jimmy Moreland, I'm sure we'll talk about him in a second, did not make the roster. A bit of a surprise there. Safeties, 4 safeties, and Landon Collins, Cam Curl, Bobby McCain, and DeShazer Everett. No Jeremy Reeves there. Ends up getting back onto the practice squad, but be interesting to see if that stays the same. And then the 3 specialists who have kind of been there all along despite Dustin Hopkins' struggles. He is the kicker along with Tress Way and the cheese man as the long snapper. So that rounds out the defense and the special teams. What are our overall thoughts? I think there are a few things that stand out.
Yeah, let's talk about first Dark Forest. That's kind of been more progressing later on this afternoon. Moved to IR, which means since it was after the 4 p.m. deadline today, he's eligible to return after the first 3 games. So if he's healthy, ready to come back, he can come back the week of the Falcons. Mm-hmm. So that'd be a good little surprise going out to Atlanta if he's healthy.
Well, and real quick, something I learned this offseason, I was like, why don't you just put him on the IR, bring him back, because we know the IR is not as strict as it had been in years past. Well, I found out, and I didn't know this, maybe I'm dumb and late to the party, but if you put a guy on the IR before he makes the active roster, he is out for the season. So that's why they couldn't do this before they did the active roster. Otherwise, these would have been way easier decisions to make. So this allows him to get back. And I'm not so sure. I mean, I'm sure he is a little banged up, but I think, maybe he's not quite ready. David Mayo steps in maybe to his spot on the special teams role, but it allows a guy that I think they like in Derek Forrest to come back eventually and kind of learn the defense and learn special teams before really throwing them out there.
Yeah, and like you said, David Mayo coming in, we knew we were going to add somebody at linebacker because running with 3 starters and 1 backup for all 3 spots is not ideal at all. It does not seem like something Rod would want to do. And he even mentioned it yesterday. He said, we are not done at that position. So we kind of knew something was going to come. But you and me talked about it today. We were texting like that. I feel you got to feel like there's more to it. You can't feel like, hey, we're not done there yet. We're bringing, Mayo back from the practice squad onto the active roster. It's not really like a, hey, we're not done there yet kind of move.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a free agent they picked up this offseason, so they obviously like him. But do you really feel like there is a chance that we could get one more guy? And I would go as far as say maybe send another guy to the practice squad, like that last spot that is open, like a Casey Toohill or someone on the offensive line. I don't know who I would even send. Maybe Tyler Larson, even though he's kind of our backup center now. To where you have an extra spot for another linebacker. Because even with 5, I feel like that's not ideal. You should have 6, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And linebackers kind of make up your special teams too. So I think, there's a good chance that, I don't know what they're going to do with inactives, but I think, you absolutely need more than 5 linebackers. And maybe they only have 2 out there at a time, when they get out of base set and all that. But I feel like they definitely have to make a move. I think that they could, potentially cut a guy from some of the places where they have an extra guy or 2. You don't really need 7 wide receivers. I think you like all of them. You risk losing one of those guys if you have to cut somebody to bring somebody else in.
Like if Dax Milne starts looking really good on kick and punt returns, you feel okay getting rid of Carter.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and Jarrett Patterson has done some kickoff returns. I think they left themselves some flexibility. Daryl Roberts was probably, number 52 or 53, of the guys that made the roster. So you could potentially let him go in place of a linebacker. They left themselves some wiggle room, which I think is important. And, the season is right around the corner, but we still have a whole week and a half to really tweak this. And I'm sure we'll be seeing over the week teams making some moves. And yeah, I absolutely think Washington has to bring in another linebacker. I think I texted you. I think overall you could almost say that this linebacker core is bad. I mean, It's not really good. I mean, you don't know what you have in Jamin Davis. Cole Holcomb has shown you some stuff. John Bostic, solid, but seems to always be a step behind. And then you got Kalik Hudson, who came into the league as a safety, and David Mayo, who's a special teams guy. I mean, you're really thin there, and you could certainly use a guy that could come in and contribute right away.
I was thinking today, if the draft started tomorrow, where would I look to improve right away? And it was still linebacker core, which is kind of sad to say after, you take Jamin Davis in the first round. But I mean, he just needs reps. Like we've talked about, he just needs time, especially as a middle linebacker. He is the hardest role of all the linebacker core. Just needs time, but it just shows you how weak it was going into the draft. Like we knew we were going to improve at the linebacker core. I think it still definitely does. But speaking of guys in linebacker, I really looked at it yesterday of a couple of guys that we could still, sign on other practice squads. And obviously, Benardrick McKinney from the Texans was a name that came around a bunch. And he just recently got traded from the Texans and Dolphins not too long ago. People were like, well, how come a guy like him would be available? And it's because of a couple other guys on my list, the linebacker room's just getting that full. And also McKinney, he's not the best in coverage. That's not what he's known for. Honestly, he wouldn't start if it's me. He'd probably be depth behind Jamin Davis because he's a middle linebacker kind of guy. Stops the run really well, blitzes really well, has a high IQ for a linebacker. But I don't know. He'd be a good depth piece for us. He would not take over John Bostic. That's one thing I saw a lot on Twitter. It's oh yeah, he would replace John Bostic. No, not at all. And I know John Bostic's terrible in coverage too, but we need to improve, not kind of do the same thing.
Right.
I feel like we'd be putting BMAC in a terrible spot, putting him in the will spot. So I actually had 2 or 3 other guys. There's a couple other guys I saw today, but obviously Micah Kaiser was the one I tweeted out. Know him just because he was a UVA guy, and me being over here in Wahoo Wah country, apparently a lot of Washington fans or UVA fans found that out on Twitter, which is always nice. But in 9 games, he had 77 tackles. That's a lot. And that's what he was really known for at UVA. He was just a sure tackler, big, hard-hitting guy. He had 3 pass deflections, 1 QB hit, and 1 forced fumble. Like I said, great run stopper, hard-hitting special teams guy, and he can blitz really well. But once again, needs to improve in the coverage. It seemed like all the guys available weren't a Corey Littleton style linebacker where they're just great in coverage, just the perfect will linebacker. It's not out there.
Well, and these guys have all been cut for reasons. They have their warts. I mean, it might be a fit situation, but it might be just, they don't have that X, Y, or Z. So you're absolutely right. There are going to be warts on all of these guys. So you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt, whoever they sign. It's not probably not going to come in as a Pro Bowler, but yeah.
And for me, it's is he better than David Mayo? Yes. Is he better than Kalik Hudson? From what we've seen, I think athletic-wise, skill-wise, Kalik Hudson's really good. It just hasn't translated to the field yet. And he had a pectoral injury in 2019, Micah did. And like I said, going into a really loaded linebacker room for the Rams, he missed that time of 2019. Obviously, they drafted the players, they pick up other guys. You kind of lose your spot. And then Evan Weaver out of Cal was a name that came up a bunch. And there's a guy actually broke down on the podcast 2 years ago after the draft saying hey, this dude's a stud. 6th round pick going into, once again, a loaded linebacker room in Arizona. And then they get David Collins adding even more to it. I mean, there's guys saying that they went out because the linebacker core is even so full. I forgot what the guy's name is. But he was a first-team All-American at Cal, had 336 tackles in 26 games. They said that was 30 more than the guy in second place, which is nuts. But just great ball instinct, great vision, but he just didn't have the best speed, and he just didn't have that twitch on blitzes. So, like I said, it's not I think we do still make a move. Obviously, people what about KJ Wright? Why is KJ Wright not signing with somebody? You don't know if it's injuries, if it's money, if it's something else. Like, why are these visits not going well for him?
And he's also 32. I mean, he's on the –
but he's still a top 100 player. Like, he's –
for sure. But, you kind of get weary when you see a guy that all he does is hit and get hit, and he's over 30. You kind of have to kind of think about that a little bit. Maybe that's part of it.
So there's a bunch of different things that can go into it. But linebacker core, I still feel like we both agree there's still a move that could definitely be made there.
Let me ask you, I was kind of thinking about this, and you've brought up Khalil Hudson for a while now. You think he could take a jump and potentially be a contributor for this team. Do you think that that's part of it, that they feel like they might have some of their answers on the roster? I mean, obviously, numbers-wise, you'd like more than 5. It's really 4 with Mayo mostly being a special teams guy. But to me, it kind of reminds – and I'm not comparing Khalil Hudson to Antonio Gibson or anybody that they cut to Adrian Peterson. But last year, I think we felt like the running back room was a little light going into the season. We were like, you got this converted wide receiver as your quote-unquote starter. You just let go one of the best running backs of all time who still had some juice in the tank. Maybe there's something we're not seeing yet, and maybe some of these guys on the roster are going to be huge contributors, and to where you really only need a couple of depth guys. Like maybe Cole Holcomb is about to take a big step forward. Maybe Khalil Hudson is going to be that sleeper player. Maybe John Bostic, for all his faults, kind of has put it together. So I don't know. I'm maybe just throwing that out there. Maybe they kind of have a plan in-house too.
I think Cole does take a leap. I could definitely see that happening. I think they like what they have in Khalil Hudson. And then obviously him playing on special teams. I feel like that's going to get him going on the field. Like just hitting somebody, going out there and just doing what you're supposed to do. And, watching defense just progress, just learning every day. He's still young. I mean, we just got him last year. So he's just going through that transition. Ron talked about, Jamin Davis getting a ton of reps before he starts getting in. You got to think the same thing with Khalil Hudson being as young as he is also. So maybe they do like what he sees. I definitely have liked Khalil Hudson for a while. Love his skill set. But also another thing to keep in mind, Jimmy Moreland. That was one of the biggest surprise cuts for us. And I know that they got rid of him on an injury designation. And what I saw about this is as soon as he reaches an agreement or a settlement with Washington, he's more than likely going to sign somewhere else. Like, we're not bringing him back. How surprised were you with that?
Yeah, that was the biggest surprise for me. I think it was a toss-up between that and AGG, but this was a guy that was starting, that was a huge contributor last year. He kind of fans fell in love with him, and I think both coaching staffs that have had him fell in love with him, just the grit that he brings and all of that. So yeah, that was certainly surprising. But the more I thought about it, the more I feel like we never really heard his name over the summer. I feel like we were hearing Torrey McTyre's name over him. I feel like we were hearing even Cole Luke's name ahead of him. And so maybe he just kind of got complacent. Maybe he kind of felt like his starting role was his to have, and that he kind of had it on ice and, kind of took a step back. I don't know the whole reasoning, and maybe there is an injury there, but it kind of sounds like they really were ready to move along. But yeah, I was definitely surprised by it. But the more I thought about it, the more we really haven't heard his name a whole lot this offseason. What were you thinking about it all?
Yeah, and it really did surprise me too. I mean, he's definitely not one that I really thought about. But you have to think about it. Like, Bobby McCain can play in the slot. Kendall Fuller can play in the slot. Ben Juice can play in the slot. Daryl Roberts can play in the slot. Like, I feel like it was just too crowded. And a lot of people are like, well, Washington picked Troy Apke over Jimmy Moreland. And not at all. They're two completely different players. Like,
right.
Troy Apke is that safety, now corner, and also Ron said he's one of the best specialists in the league. Like, that's a big praise from Ron, saying that he's one of the best specialists in the league for special teams. So it's a completely different player. Like, Jimmy Moreland could not play safety. Jimmy Moreland did not play special teams. So like, it was just, he was too one-dimensional for our defense. And I get it. Like, he's that slot guy. He looked great. He performed well in the field. But Ron's showing, like, if you can play different things for us and you're, that position flex, if you have that versatility, you're going to make the team.
For sure.
I like Daryl Roberts. I can completely understand, like, people saying, like, what's going on with that. But everyone kind of even backed up and said, yeah, Daryl Roberts, looked great in camp, and he had a really good game against the Ravens. So it's not like everyone's like, oh, wow. Like, local media-wise wasn't just like, oh, my gosh, we didn't hear Daryl Roberts once. Why are we keeping him kind of thing? They're like, yeah, he looked really good. And And like we said last week, Ron sees these guys in practice every single day. Like he knows what this team looks like and knows what he has on this team. So I'm not second guessing anything Ron does on that. So also Steven Montez to the Lions, he was picked up. Not really surprised by that, but that's another thing where it seems like we could definitely need like a practice squad emergency quarterback. And I'd put a name out there. Shane Buechele was one of my guys at SMU, transferred from Texas, lit it up at SMU. And then he went undrafted to the Chiefs. Looked good in preseason, had some flashes. So that's just one name I'd throw out there to bring in to be like a practice squad emergency quarterback.
Yeah, for sure. I was kind of surprised that they didn't bring in a quarterback, whether it be like a Will Grier who goes to the Cowboys, somebody that was kind of familiar with Ron and Scott Turner. But what I thought was interesting, we mentioned the practice squad. I think they signed 15 of their 16 slots, and they were all cuts from the Washington football team. I don't think they didn't bring in anybody new. They didn't bring anybody outside.
A lot of teams did, honestly. I think there's only like maybe 10 or 11 actual like waiver pickups that happened.
Yeah, I saw the same thing, and so it's interesting. So I mean, they like their guys, but I feel like a practice squad almost always needs a quarterback. So maybe there's a plan there, or maybe they're just waiting for the right guy to become available or something like that. So I just thought that was interesting that 15 of those guys, all 15 of the guys that they signed were their cuts. And then kudos to Steven Montez for getting picked up. I wasn't sure that he would be, but he is athletic. He's a big dude, and so he certainly wouldn't hurt to have on your scout team. And so maybe a fresh look on a fresh team would be a really good spot for him. Yeah,
the Lions are wild. They cut both of their kickers. I don't know what the heck they're about to do.
Yeah, and then
Dan Campbell, you go, you do you, son.
And then one thing locally here, I saw that the Falcons cut their only long snapper. So I'm not sure what these teams are doing. They must have some tricks up their sleeve or something. But some interesting moves all around the league.
Yeah, Washington fans, y'all kind of want to just do the same thing to start bringing in kickers and get rid of Hopkins. Like, that's not always the best idea, but you mentioned it. All the roster guys that came to the practice squad: Peyton Barber, Bo Benchwell, no idea how to say his name.
Yeah.
William Bradley King, who was one of the guys I was kind of surprised at, didn't make the cut, but it looks like Casey Tuhill really took his spot. And then him and Shaka Toney kind of have that similar play also. And then, of course, Antonio Gandy Golden, Keith Ishmael for the center spot. Danny Johnson, who you can make an argument, I was surprised just because of his kick return abilities, and then he's just a vet, so I figured he was going to make the team. So that was kind of a surprise to me. I can never say this guy's name either. Jordan Kunis. Yep.
You just stop talking halfway through.
His name's JK. And Wes Martin, Jared Norris, Jeremy Reeves, who was a big surprise to others. But if you think about it, this is his fourth time going to the practice squad.
Yeah.
That poor guy.
I mean, but you need a guy like that. You need a guy that's ready to have his number called, and it might not be right away. He's kind of like a pinch hitter, like for a baseball team. There are some guys whose egos can't handle that, but he seems like a kind of guy that's ready and willing to contribute whenever his number's called. So it's a bummer that he's not on the 53. I feel like he certainly earned it, and in some split alternate universe, he definitely made it, but I think he's still going to contribute to this team.
I agree. And then Bunmi, Rodamy, never even heard of this person. David Steinmetz, John Toth, again, bring him back, cut him again, sign him to the practice squad. Daniel Wise and Gabe Wright, just that defensive tackle spot. And there was actually a pretty good noticeable names of people that were cut around the league. I legit made a list. Charles Snowden is another linebacker, by the way, that I was thinking of. Another UVA guy. But I was like, man, there's just like these young talent. All these guys that I scouted in college, great talent. Like I just feel like they were in bad spots. I was just kind of surprised at some of these, but there's definitely options out there. Like I think we'll make a couple of moves. I don't think I'll be able to ton. But I think linebacker is definitely that one that's going to be made. But guys, speaking of other teams, we have an extra addition to the podcast. Exciting news. Our pod is partnering with playactionpools.com this season to bring some interactive fun to the sport we love most. So even if we're losing, there's time for us to start winning. So you'll be able to get in on the action with our playactionpools.com football pick'em challenge. This is something I do like every week anyways. Me and my dad used to get the newspaper on Sundays, and they'd always have like the layout of the games on Sunday, and we'd circle them and make little bets and stuff like that. So it kind of reminded me of that. But here's how it works. Sign up for our contest, Believe Football Pick'em at playactionpools.com, and then get your picks in each week. We're going to select the 10 highest profile games of the week between NFL and college football, so you can mix it up. You know I love college football. Whoever gets the most picks correct in each week will win a pair of electric sunglasses and a pair of DC shoes. I'll take free stuff all day long. Brian said, sign me up.
Yeah.
Again, go to playactionpools.com and sign up for the contest Believe, which is BLEAV. Football pick'em. And if you plan on hosting your own football contest, go to playactionpools.com today. They've got Survivor pick'em as well as cool sports book style concepts called Build Your Bankroll. So I don't know if y'all do like office, like pick'ems and stuff like that. We do it at work all the time. We used to print out papers. This is just an easy way to do it, and it's right on your phone. Who doesn't like easy stuff? But I'm looking forward to that because I do pick'ems all the time anyways, and you're not really losing money on this one. So if you're not a sports betting person, that's an easy way to get involved. But speaking of other teams, guys, like Brian said, we have what, like 10 days till week 1?
Mm-hmm.
It's winding down. How do you feel about this roster compared to last year? This is Ron's second real offseason to build the team that he wants up. Do you feel like he really has an identity and how he wants it to be? I think it's still in progress. I think it's getting there, but I think we're really kind of seeing what Ron's been wanting to do with this team. How are you feeling about the squad?
Yeah, I think I said it earlier, flexibility and some wiggle room, to make some moves that, could potentially be made before the season starts or even as the season goes along. But then flexibility position wise, I mean, he's been preaching that all the time, right? He's always talking about position flexibility and a guy that can play in multiple places and all of that. And we see that across the board. And I think it's the reason we already talked about that, Jimmy Moreland didn't make the roster, whereas Troy Apke did because he can play corner and safety.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of those backup offensive linemen, we can see them as guards or as tackles, a couple of the wide receivers are obviously going to play special teams and have the chance to be return guys. Some of the defensive linemen, maybe they rotate in as a linebacker here and there. I mean, there's all kinds of flexibility, and that seems like something Ron has really preached from day one. And, you're right. I don't think it's fully there, but I definitely see his thumbprint and I definitely see his imprint on this roster. And it feels like he is slowly getting there, which would be really, really awesome. And so I'm excited about this. I feel like, they have a chance to do something special because the top half of their roster are legit guys, legit, playmakers on both sides of the ball. And so it'll be exciting to see. I'm excited to see his plan kind of come together. A coach's first year and, they went to the playoffs and all that, but a coach's first year still is kind of, what did he inherit? How did he kind of make do with what he had? But this year he's really
big whole mess.
Yeah. And this year he's really been able to turn it over a little bit. And, I don't know the numbers of who was not there before he got there, that kind of thing, but he certainly has brought in some of his guys and hopefully this year it shows. So yeah, I'm excited about it. I don't think it's the best roster in the league. I still think there are some holes and some weak spots, but I think they'll get there. And I think this will be a competitive team.
Yeah. And I think it's the 2019 draft. There's only like 2 guys left in our draft class that we had just because it's just clearing out house. But I feel like that's something we talked about so often is like, oh, that wasn't a Ron's guy. That was the old regime kind of player. I feel like that really stood out with the roster cuts and everything now too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's going to take one more offseason for Ron to really be at where he wants to be. And like I said, this isn't by any means a final roster. Anything could happen. Like still could sign guys in other practice squads to be on the 53. One tweet I saw today, it was kind of confusing, but I wanted to talk about it because it's an interesting note. And our own Nikki decided that this could play into Washington too, which is kind of what we talked about with the linebacker core. But Greg Allman tweeted, one thing to watch for across the league today. If a vested veteran is on your 53 for week 1, his salary becomes fully guaranteed. Why? I have no clue. Not important. To get around this, you'll see teams sign a vet to the practice squad for week 1, elevate them on game day, and then move them to the 53 in week 2. So kind of what Gruden did to Adrian Peterson before was cool. He did it for completely different reasons.
Yeah.
And then Nikki came back and said, very possible Washington keeps the spot open, which we did on the practice squad. If it does sign a linebacker to the 53, now we have 5. At the time we had 4, but still definitely a possibility. They have to cut someone else who could go on the practice squad, assuming they clear waivers, and they can make room for that other linebacker. So you and me kind of looked at the roster a little bit. Like if we were to bring in one more linebacker, like where could we send someone to the practice squad and stuff like that? So just even more kind of, I don't want to say like foreshadowing that something could happen, because why else would you kind of leave one practice squad open?
Right.
Or was it just because Steven Montez got taken and that's what we kind of had it for, and then we're going to get that quarterback?
Yeah, I thought it might be for a quarterback, but then seeing that makes a whole lot of sense. So it will be interesting to see. Like we've kind of have preached, I don't think that this is going to be the 53 guys that go into week 1, and that's only 10 days away, like we've been saying. So I think there is some flexibility there. There is some maneuvering that can be made. And then you also have to kind of think about, not only is that money guaranteed, but you could potentially bring in a linebacker who doesn't know the system, who might need a week or 2. Maybe you don't want him out there week 1. So it just gives you kind of some options to bring up a guy that, is on the practice squad, but might know the defense better, that kind of thing. It just kind of leaves it open your options. And like you said, there are a couple of back end guys that, you hate to have guys lose their jobs, but that could make room for a guy here or there. So it will be interesting to see. I'd be willing to bet money that there is another signing or 2, and that we are certainly not done with this group, but you kind of get your basis and your foundation here. So it'll be interesting to see what moves they make.
I will say, were you at all surprised that we didn't have one of our wave players that we signed back to practice squad picked up by another team like AGG, who I'm sure got a lot of interest being a 4th round pick with his skill set, and then a guy like Jeremy Reeves, who has shown flashes when he was on the field? Like, were you at all surprised that no one else really picked him up? Or do you think, like everyone's been saying, it's like that fan Ashburn syndrome, just, saying our players are better than what they actually are?
Well, I think we fall in love with our guys because we're watching this team day in and day out. So, we know what Jeremy Reeves can bring, whereas there are probably 30 other Jeremy Reeves out there. There are safeties that work really hard and that
we have no idea even exist.
Yeah, and so I think that there's a lot of that. I mean, we saw like the Eagles get rid of Travis Fulgham. I think he led them in receiving last year. I mean, there were a lot of like receivers and young receivers. Yeah, there are a lot of young receivers and, defensive backs that kind of got loose. I think they held on to the couple of guys that would have been snatched up, and Jarrett Patterson, Sammis Reyes, some of those guys, I really do think they might have been snatched up. So yeah, I'm not super surprised. I thought, what I am surprised by again is that Steven Montez is the one guy that got swooped up. I was kind of shocked by that. Man. Yeah, you need quarterbacks for sure, but I, didn't see a lot from him. So I'm not super shocked. I really do think we talk ourselves into some training camp heroes, and then we forget that there are 32 teams with 30 other guys that have been cut. And so there's a big pool to pick from. The tricky thing also is it's not like you just get to pick a guy. I'm pretty sure if you pick a guy up like that, you have to put him to the
53.
The 53.
Yeah. You can't just go practice squad to practice squad. Yeah.
Yeah. So there is that. That means you're cutting another guy that you potentially like. So it's not that simple. I mean, it's a game. It's a risk that you're willing to take. And so I'm sure that there were teams that did look at guys like Jeremy Reeves and Antonio Gandy-Golden, but just couldn't pull the trigger on them. And so Washington will happily take them back, guys that know the system and, have shown some flashes. You can't have enough of those guys on your practice squad and on your backups.
Yeah, and a lot of these guys that did get cut went back to the teams that cut them. I was looking at some guys that I studied, like I said, at the draft, like Seth Williams was a wide receiver out of Auburn, great hands. I was like, man, there's so many players out there. Kenny Yeboah was another tight end that a lot of people were talking about for Washington. Then he had an insane game for the Jets preseason, and then they cut him, brought him back. Just a bunch of guys that I looked at. I was like, man, it's so surprising how many big names and like you fall in love with these players. You're like, man, like how will they cut like Kenny Yeboah? Like he's a good tight end. Like they just got rid of Herndon.
I thought about that too. Like I saw that name and I recognized that name, but then you think about, are you really going to replace Ricky Seals-Jones with a third rookie tight end? So there are questions like that all across the league where it's intriguing, but you're not sure you can take a chance on a guy when you're that light and that inexperienced at a spot. So it is really tricky. And hopefully all these guys, sign on to practice squads and then make impact plays down the line, because it's got to be tough to be with a team all summer and then have it ripped out from underneath you. So I know that we talk about and we care about the team and the guys on the field, but there's a business side and a personal side to all this. So hopefully all these guys.
I would hate to be wrong.
Yeah, for sure. And hopefully these guys land elsewhere and kind of stay hungry, which it seems like a guy like Jeremy Reeves is absolutely going to do. So you hope that he is a big part of this team moving forward.
And last thing I want to talk about roster cut wise, obviously we kind of have to talk about it. I really don't want to, but I mean, everyone else kind of is. So I feel like we kind of need to. Cam Newton, I don't think that was ever going to be an option. First off, I was shocked. Then the more I thought about it, I'm like, you don't keep him because he doesn't want to be QB2.
Yeah.
He wouldn't want to be.
Going back to previous times, I mean, we had this conversation last year. I mean, would we have wanted Cam Newton to be Dwayne Haskins' backup? I mean, he just he's not a backup quarterback. No. He really is either a starter or he's, he's, yeah. I mean, absolutely. And I don't think he's a bad guy. I just think he has such a big personality that it's hard to hide that and hard to have that not be a distraction.
Yeah. And like for me, it's just the fact that it's QB1 or nothing. And Bill knew that. Like if you're going to roll with Mac, you can't have that lingering daily reminder of like Cam Newton, like, hey, like I am better than this guy. He firmly believes he's better than Mac Jones. And like I would too. If I'm playing, it doesn't matter if I'm a long snapper. I'm like, hey, I'm better than Khalil Mack.
Yeah.
Like you have to have that mindset in the NFL. You can't just be like, yeah, man, I'm just here. Like, I guess I'm okay.
Right.
Like,
there's an ego that goes into it. And that's what made Cam so great, but it's also kind of what makes him not an option for a lot of teams, unfortunately.
Yeah. But I was just glad to see my guy, Mac Jones, obviously big Alabama guy, looking forward to see what he does. But I knew as soon as he got cut, I'm like, here we go. Because people have been saying, even in the offseason, like, bring Cam Newton and, like, pay him. And we'll have, like, these two QBs. Like, we have Ryan Fitzpatrick, Cam Newton. That's fine. No, not at all. That's the last thing you want. And to be honest with you, I would rather have Taylor Heineke and Kyle Allen. I mean, I know Cam Newton knows the system, but it's a different style of play he has. It's not at all. It's the complete opposite of what Ryan Fitzpatrick does. Yeah. So you'd be going from one-stop quarterback to the complete opposite, and we just don't need that. And once again, you're taking a roster spot over.
Yeah. Absolutely. And he's not the same guy. I mean, he might be the same size, but he's not the same guy. He's taken a lot of hits, a lot of miles on that engine. And so, it just doesn't make sense. But speaking of number one, we haven't talked about the most important thing with the roster, jersey number updates.
So if you're crazy enough to get a jersey by one of these guys that might not be here for the next 3 years.
Hey, how about DeAndre Carter taking number one? I was surprised by that. He better have a return touchdown if he's going to take number one and wear that.
That was probably the weirdest one of the new ones that I've seen was DeAndre Carter taking number one. The one that's going to take me forever to get used to is Cam Sims taking AGG's number 11, who fought so long for it just to lose it like a month later.
What was Cam Sims in college? Do you remember off the top of your head, being a Bama guy?
Gosh, you had to ask me.
I'll look it up. You keep talking. I'm going to look it up, see if I can find it.
Cam Sims, Alabama. If I type Cam Sims, Alabama, it's going to be nothing but injuries. I think he was 17.
Good call.
Is
yes, sir. Yeah, good call.
For the 3 games he played for us. So, going from 11 – I don't know. It's going to look weird. I like the number 11 on wide receivers. I thought 89, but I just got so used to seeing him be 89. I thought he looked good in 89. Like, I don't know.
With all the
Santana Moss thing, like, does he deserve it?
With all the receivers going to the teens, it stands out when a guy's in the 80s. So I kind of like that.
Yeah, I was hyped when De'Ami Brown was number 2. I was like, yes, that is like that's the best jersey in our team, right there with Terry McLaurin 17 and Chase Young 99. De'Ami Brown having number 2 because of his celebration and everything. Dax Milne 15. I think that's a good number for a small guy. I hated, 84?
Yeah, it's big and bulky. Yeah.
just too big on the jersey. A little slim down, number 15 for Dax Milne. Bobby McCain, this is your favorite one.
By far the best.
Oh, yeah. Taking Jimmy Moreland's number 20.
Bobby McCain is just increased his interception total by he doubled it. Whatever it was going to be, he doubled
2 to 4.
Well, I mean, 38 and 48 are the two worst jersey numbers in sports.
I felt so bad for Forrest. I'm like 48.
Yeah, maybe if he works his way back onto the roster, he can get something better too. But McCain just became close to an All-Pro with that number, or took a step closer, being number 20.
Pro Bowl bound Bobby McCain, number 20. Jarrett Patterson going to 32. I think that's a weird number too. I wanted him to be in the 20s. I would love to see a single digit running back too. Like, give him like number 8.
That would have been sweet.
That'd be like 0. Give him 0.
I think I saw he tweeted out a picture. He wore 32 at some point in his youth days.
Yeah, I'd have time.
So,
but
his I think his Twitter handle for a minute was 26, but Landon Collins has that. So maybe some of his other options were already taken. 32 is not bad. Jim Brown, all-timer. But it does look a little weird nowadays. You haven't seen a 32 running back here for a while.
Jarrett,
Marcus Allen.
To this, man, go with number 0 next year, man. That'd be such a baller
awesome
pick. Number 0, Jarrett Patterson. Practice squad. Poor
well, and then Adam Humphries 13.
Adam Humphries 13. Yeah. Lucky 13.
19 to 13.
Yeah, lucky 13. Ryan Fitzpatrick's favorite player. I think it's going to be big moves all season long. Man, Aged, you got the cursed number 18.
Yeah,
we've not that's like the worst. Who's that? Dotson was 18. Yeah. You hate to see it. Peyton Barber.
Maybe he can take 19 from Humphries. 19 looks better than 18.
Yeah, I thought 19 was clean. That's good on like a tall guy like AG too. Peyton Barber 38, irrelevant. Danny Johnson 36 is what it is.
I think Danny Johnson has had like 12 different numbers in his time with Washington, so maybe 36 will be it finally.
Cam Sims, I think 11 is going to look good. It's kind of wearing on me now that I look at it more. But if you're into any of these guys getting their jersey, I probably wouldn't, just because I'm sure this will change a lot, because Antonio Gandy-Golden's had 3 numbers already since he's been here. It's been a year and a couple months. So
yeah.
But yeah, Cam Sims 11. That's so interesting to see. I can't wait for that one. But obviously, like you said, 10 more days. We're going to break down the Chargers coming up. Brian, anything you want to add before we get out of here and start crunching some numbers for the San Diego game? Because we have a lot of homework to do.
Yeah, it's getting real.
We haven't seen Herbert. We don't know what to expect. We haven't seen the offensive coordinator. We haven't seen anything they're going to do.
Yeah, I mean, I know fantasy isn't everything, but when you have a guy like Austin Eckler and Keenan Allen being like a top 20 pick, arguably, Washington the same way, though. Antonio Gibson and Terry McLaurin going pretty early. I mean, there are going to be some offensive fireworks, you hope, and you hope that the defense that was pretty dominant all last year in Washington can shut them down just a little bit. So, yeah, I'm excited to dive into them and kind of see what they do. And I know there are a couple of new coaches there, so it'll be interesting to see. There could be some rust, like you said. We haven't seen Herbert, but that's for the preview pod, which is so close. I can't wait.
Yeah, next week, one more podcast until we are together at the game. That's crazy to even think about.
Nuts,
Brian's
man.
coming to Virginia. How long has it been since you've been up here?
Well, I visit family up there all the time, but for an actual game, I haven't been there since the lost to the Packers in the playoffs, where they jumped out. I think it was like an 11-0 lead. And then, Aaron Rodgers remembered he was Aaron Rodgers. So it's been a minute since I've been up there for a game. I can't wait. It's going to be an awesome time.
You got a lot of cool festivities going on before the game, so keep up with that on Twitter. But guys, like we said, we will be back for the preview pod because there's so many matchups to look forward to. To me, this is game of the week 1. Like matchup wise and like how close it is. And if you saw like the people were like making predictions already on like NFL Network and stuff, it's like 50-50.
And speaking of betting on games, I saw that Washington is now only a dog by 1 point in a couple of places. So it's moved a little bit. I'm not an expert on that, but I know that it means that people are definitely looking into this game. So I think it's an exciting game, and two teams that really have playoff potential and playoff aspirations. we already kind of mentioned it. It could be a big win or loss for these teams come week 18.
Yeah. I mean, with our fan base, if we win, we're hype. If we lose, we're like, what went wrong? Why?
Yeah.
Hold on now. What's going on week 1? But yeah, I think at one point we were like 3.5 point favorites and then 2.5 point favorites. And now Vegas is in on the Chargers, I guess, after our preseason showing, which means nothing. So I'll take it. I would rather us be the underdogs going into the game.
Me too.
So speaking of betting, guys, like we said, this episode is presented by BetOnline. So go to betonline.com. Get those odds before they change back into Washington's favor. Underdogs, more money for you to bet on. So, guys, we will see you next week for the first preview pod of the season. See you, Brian.
Peace.